Everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling a topic that's, it's close to home for a lot of people, and it's something that a lot of people are dealing with. It's caregiver burnout. We've got articles for you, we've got some personal stories, we've even got some discussion about legislation. And we're going to explore not only what burnout is, but how we can recognize it, prevent it, and manage it.
Yeah, it's such a big topic, and it's so critical, I think,
Yeah.
because so often caregiving happens, behind closed doors.
Right.
And it's a huge toll on the caregiver, and it can go completely unnoticed by everybody else.
Totally.
So we want to equip you, the listener, with the knowledge and the strategies to navigate these challenges, whether you're a caregiver yourself or, somebody who is.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of solutions,
Right.
how would you explain exactly what caregiver burnout is? I think a lot of people hear that term and they think, oh yeah, that's just stress.
Right.
Right.
It's so much more than just everyday stress, though.
Yeah.
It's a state of just complete exhaustion.
Yeah.
Emotional,
Yeah.
physical, and mental, and it just permeates every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And as a caregiver, you're constantly on high alert. You're making so many sacrifices. You're putting everybody else's needs before your own,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to take its toll.
Of course.
And one striking statistic we found in an AARP survey said that almost 4 in 10 caregivers reported rarely or never feeling at ease.
Oh, wow.
So that just highlights
4 in 10.
the magnitude of this invisible epidemic.
Yeah, 4 in 10. That's a huge number.
Huge.
It's heartbreaking to think about all those people struggling in silence, you know, and that statistic actually reminds me of Emma Heming-Willis.
Yeah.
She's been very open about the challenges of caring for her husband, Bruce Willis,
Right.
since his diagnosis with frontotemporal dementia. And for those who might not be familiar, that's a type of dementia that affects language, behavior, and personality.
Right. And it's so important to bring up her story because it really highlights how isolating and overwhelming it can be.
Absolutely. And she's spoken about that sense of invisibility that so many caregivers feel.
Yes.
It's almost as if society expects us to just handle it all quietly
Yeah.
without burdening anyone.
Right. And it's often seen as a private family matter.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that can prevent people from reaching out for help or acknowledging their struggles.
Right. And so that makes me wonder, how do we even know if we or someone we care about is experiencing burnout?
Yeah.
What are some of the signs that go beyond just feeling stressed or tired?
Well, it's important to remember that burnout manifests differently in everybody.
Right.
But there are some commonalities. Physically, you might notice fatigue, you might have trouble sleeping, changes in appetite, or even getting sick more often.
Okay.
Emotionally, burnout can show up as increased anxiety, irritability, sadness, or just a sense of being constantly overwhelmed.
Yeah. So it can really impact you on multiple levels. It's not just in your head. It's
Yeah.
your body and emotions, too.
Exactly. And, in one of the articles we read, Teresa Wilbanks, who became her father's primary caregiver, talked about not even recognizing herself in the mirror after a while.
Yeah, it's almost as if caregiving can chip away at your sense of self.
It can.
Yeah.
And, the AARP survey also found that over a third of caregivers report experiencing physical strain from their caregiving duties.
Wow.
And Mary Lou Falcone, who cared for her husband with Lewy body dementia, spoke powerfully about that toll as well.
It's so important to hear those real-life stories. It makes it clear that this isn't just an abstract concept.
Right.
It's something that's impacting millions of people in very real ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think, is there anyone in my life who might be going through this right now? And if so, how can I help? What can we do to prevent this or manage it if it's already happening?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Recognizing it is important, but taking action is key. And, the sources that we've gathered, they offer some pretty practical strategies. For example, Teresa Wilbanks, who we talked about earlier, she learned a powerful lesson about setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
She talked about a situation with her siblings where she was trying to do everything herself, and she was just overwhelmed and resentful.
Right, so boundaries aren't just about delegating tasks.
Right.
It's also about protecting your own well-being.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Mhm.
You got to take care of yourself to take care of someone else.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries is a way to do that.
It makes me think about that old saying, it takes a village.
Right.
You can't do it all alone. You need support.
Absolutely. And sometimes asking for help can be the hardest part. In one of the articles, former Wisconsin Governor Marty Schreiber, who cared for his wife with Alzheimer's for 18 years, talked about how he wished he had reached out for help sooner.
Right.
instead of trying to do everything himself.
It's such a common feeling we think we should be able to handle it all.
Yeah.
But it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
You need to pace yourself and draw on that support.
Yeah. And speaking of support systems, support groups seem to make a huge difference for a lot of caregivers.
Mm.
Both Mary Lou Falcone and Jerry Bishop that we mentioned earlier talked about the power of connecting with others who truly understand what you're going through.
Yeah, it's like finding your tribe in the middle of a storm.
Exactly.
You realize you're not alone. There's
Mhm.
strength in shared experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And beyond that sense of community, it's important to find individual ways to recharge and take care of yourself.
Okay.
Teresa Wilbanks, she finds solace in meditation and breathing exercises.
Oh, wow.
While Jerry Bishop, he makes time for weekend camping trips to escape into nature.
So it's all about finding those pockets of peace
Right.
and rejuvenation to help you cope with the stress.
Mm-hmm.
It can be something as simple as taking a walk in nature,
Mm-hmm.
listening to music, spending time with friends.
And even something as unconventional as swearing can be a healthy outlet.
Really?
One of the articles mentioned some research from Ulster University suggesting that yelling a few choice words into a pillow can help you regulate those intense emotions.
I have to admit there are times when a well-placed curse word does feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you.
Okay.
And along with finding healthy outlets for stress, it's equally important to focus on the positive, even amidst challenging circumstances.
That can be tough. When you're feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
how do you even begin to shift your perspective?
Well, there's a concept in positive psychology called 3 good things, where you take a few moments each day to reflect on 3 positive things that happened, no matter how small they are.
I love that it's such a simple practice, but I can see how it would make a big difference.
Yeah, it's about intentionally cultivating those moments of joy and appreciation that might otherwise get lost in the day-to-day challenges. It's a way of building resilience and reminding yourself that even in difficult times, there are still things to be grateful for.
This focus on individual coping mechanisms is so important, but it makes me wonder about the role of society as a whole.
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be more support beyond individual efforts?
You're absolutely right. Caregiver burnout isn't just a personal problem. It's a societal issue that requires systemic solutions.
Right.
We need greater recognition of the invaluable role that caregivers play. And that means advocating for policies that provide tangible support.
And that brings us to the legislation discussions that are happening right now. One of the articles from MarketWatch highlighted 2 bipartisan proposals making their way through Congress, the Wishy-Ash Act and the Credit for Caring Act.
Yeah, these are really encouraging developments.
Okay.
The Wishy-Ash Act aims to create a federal long-term care insurance program to provide financial assistance for people who need help with daily living activities, things like bathing, dressing, and eating.
So it's like a safety net for families?
Exactly. And remember that statistic from the AARP survey about financial strain being a major contributor to burnout.
Yeah.
This type of program could significantly ease the burden on families and allow caregivers to focus on providing care without having to worry so much about the financial aspect.
That's huge. What about the Credit for Caring Act?
That one's all about providing tax relief for working family caregivers.
Okay.
It proposes a tax credit of up to $5,000 to help offset some of those out-of-pocket expenses that can really add up.
Wow.
Things like medical supplies, transportation, even respite care, so that caregivers can take a break.
It's heartening to see that this issue is starting to gain some traction in the political arena.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a lot we can do on a personal level
Mhm.
to support caregivers in our own communities.
Absolutely. Even small gestures can have a huge impact.
Yeah.
Checking in on a caregiver, offering to run errands, simply listening with empathy can be so helpful.
Yeah.
And never underestimate the power of a simple thank you. Acknowledging their hard work can make a big difference.
I'm reminded of a story a friend told me. She was caring for her elderly mother who had Alzheimer's, and one day a neighbor brought over a casserole.
Wow.
Not for her mother, but for her R.
That's so nice.
And my friend said it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in months.
Wow.
It was just a simple act of kindness,
Yeah.
but it meant the world to her because it acknowledged what she was going through.
And that speaks to the importance of shifting our perspective on caregiving.
Right.
We need to move away from the expectation that caregivers should just handle it silently and without complaint.
We need to create a culture of compassion and understanding,
Yes.
where caregiving is valued and supported. It's about recognizing that supporting caregivers benefits everyone.
Right.
It strengthens families, communities, and society as a whole.
Well said. It's about creating a world where caregiving is not a path to burnout, but a source of strength and resilience, both for the caregiver and the person receiving care.
It really makes you think about, the sandwich generation.
Right.
Those folks who are caught between, you know, caring for aging parents
Right.
and raising their own children.
Yeah.
It's like a double dose of responsibility.
It is. It's such a great point, and it highlights how caregiving isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. It evolves over time, and different life stages bring different demands.
Yeah.
And, the sandwich generation is a perfect example of how those roles overlap and create this complex web of responsibilities.
Yeah, it's almost like a Venn diagram
Yes.
with all these circles of responsibility closing in on you.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine burnout in that situation could be even more intense.
Absolutely. And that underscores the need for, flexible and adaptable support systems.
Right.
For someone in the sandwich generation, it might be about finding creative ways to involve their own children in caregiving.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. It could be something as simple as, helping grandma with a puzzle or reading to grandpa.
Yeah.
It not only lightens the load for the primary caregiver, but it also fosters intergenerational connections and empathy.
It's beautiful.
Right.
It turns into a family affair where everyone's contributing,
Yes.
learning valuable lessons.
And it circles back to that idea of shared responsibility that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Caregiving doesn't have to be a solo act.
Right.
It can be collaborative and strengthen those family bonds.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we did.
We talked about what caregiver burnout is, how to recognize the signs. We explored some strategies for prevention and management, and even talked about legislation and societal change.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. And I hope our listeners are walking away feeling informed and empowered and maybe a little bit more hopeful.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And understanding caregiver burnout is the first step toward creating a more supportive and compassionate world for these folks.
To all of our listeners out there, whether you're a caregiver, new to this, or just want to be a better ally, just remember that you're not alone.
You're not.
There are resources, there are people who understand, and there's strength in those shared experiences.
And never underestimate the power of those small acts of kindness.
Right.
A listening ear, a helping hand, a thank you.
Yeah.
Those can be huge.
They can be beacons of light.
Yes.
So let's work together to create a world where caregiving is honored and sustained. Not a path to burnout,
Right.
but a source of profound connection and resilience.
Well said.
And on that note, we'll sign off for today. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those conversations going.